Good evening and welcome to the Eclectic Radical. As always, I'm Chris Richards, the Eclectic Radical. And with me tonight is returning friend of the show from West Virginia, former co-chair of the West Virginia Democratic Party Indigenous Caucus, Seth Sturm. Welcome back, Seth. Introduce yourself to anyone who hasn't seen the show before.
All right. Yeah. First of all, let me thank you, Chris, for having me on and giving me the opportunity to connect with people and tell my story. I am the former Indigenous Caucus. I like to say it's difficult to, it makes it sound like I'm the last, I'm no longer chair, but the caucus no longer exists.
Exactly.
So I'm the only chair of the former West Virginia Democratic Party Indigenous Caucus. I was the first and last. That was the 14th Indigenous Caucus for any Democratic state party in the country. And we disbanded because of racism within the Democratic Party of West Virginia. That's Joe Manchin's Democratic Party for anybody who isn't aware. And the problems that, started, they don't start with Joe Manchin and they don't end with Joe Manchin is basically what our problem here in West Virginia is. It's just the area we're in and the way politics is played and the way that national people have sold us out to has made a major part of it. And so lately here in West Virginia, the Democrats, they've lost most of their seats. I think there's something like 11, maybe 11 in the House of Representatives out of, I can't think of the exact number. It's maybe 100 and I'm not sure the exact number, but it's not very many Democrats there. And then I think 4 or 5 in the Senate. I'm not sure of the exact numbers. So they're losing very badly.
Yeah.
And they're continuing this path of running to the right, not holding themselves accountable whatsoever. And so what we've been seeing here in West Virginia over the past couple of weeks even is we had a newly elected progressive Democrat voting for anti-trans legislation.
I saw Paula Jean Swearengin tweet about that, and I'm very interested in the history there, because why are people who were elected as progressives voting for trans bans?
Well, as far as I know, he's never issued a public statement explaining his vote. So the only thing that I could tell you is what I've heard through the grapevine, and I don't know how reliable that is. So I don't think that that's worth sharing. Now, some of the things that I can say is that there are some Democrats, especially on the Democratic Executive Committee, because there's factions in the party and they're not happy and they want the committee to do something, but it's hard to get that body to act in any way. So I'm not sure how I feel about micromanaging the from these particular people, but it's something to think about. I would like to see the Democrats at least try to start holding people in their party accountable for the votes that they make and making them adhere to some version of the Democratic platform.
So here's the problem as I see it. I think the Democratic Party does hold their members accountable for how they vote, just not in the way we would want them to. I mean, they won't hold someone accountable for voting for an abortion ban or a trans ban, but they will hold someone accountable for voting the wrong way on funding the police or the for at the federal level, Israel, the war in Ukraine. There are lots of things they're willing to fund both at the state and federal level that they would never funding what we would want them to fund or vote for.
That's kind of the point. So we have these people that are, I hate to use buzzwords, but sometimes buzzwords really work. And in the terms of this type of Democrat, virtue signaling is a perfect term for what it is that they're doing. They say they believe a certain way, and then their actions don't back that up whatsoever. And they're hypocrites. So we're seeing that here in West Virginia with, I'm sorry if you can hear that bird. It's very loud. But it says that's what's happening here with Democrats. So we have 2 issues right now where this is highlighted. Number one is like we're talking about with Delegate Elliot Pritt voting against the trans. I believe he voted against House Bill 2007. That's prohibiting gender reassignment surgery or gender altering medication to people under the age of 18, with a few medical exceptions. And They're very, very few. And so we have that issue where the Democrats have been largely silent, even though most of these issues for LGBTQ, they will speak out against those who vote against the people's rights, because that's something that they want to project to people, that's something that they believe in. But even this time, when a Democrat has voted the wrong way, they're largely silent. And another issue where you can really see this on display, the dichotomy of who they'll go against and who they won't. The public broadcasting here in West Virginia fired a reporter after she reported the story about homeless shelters and people dying.
I remember that.
Right. So the Democrats are kind of gloating because the Republican, not gloating, but they're pushing and they're supporting this investigation into political pressure in public broadcasting, and asking why was this person fired and all of that, which is a good thing. It's a very good thing.
Yes.
But there's this newspaper that's owned, I don't think it's owned, but it's ran by this Democrat who's in the one of the few Democrats that's left elected in the House. I think it's in the House. He could be a senator. It doesn't really matter, but his name is Doug Scaff. And Doug fired, I think, 3 reporters who said something negative about Don Blankenship, who, if you know who Don Blankenship is, he's one of the worst coal barons that's ever.
The only thing good that Don Blankenship has ever done is coin the nickname Cocaine Mitch. That's how bad he is.
He's pretty bad. He's really bad. So these people got fired for speaking out against him and the newspaper's softball handling of him, and they got fired. And people were outraged, rightfully so. And they called upon the Democratic Party leaders to make a statement to come out in support of these journalists and to hold this member of leadership accountable through their, whatever means necessary available to them through the party apparatus. And there was no action taken, and so to see them go out and make these statements against public broadcasting.
And so this was
the other
Democrat who fired reporters for criticizing Don Blankenship.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and Joe Manchin is a Democrat. And Joe Manchin's greatest success running the West Virginia Democratic Party is getting Jim Justice to run for and win the governor's chair as a Democrat. What's Jim Justice now again?
Jim Justice is a Republican, and I think I've mentioned this before on this show, but I think it's worth mentioning again. What happened with Jim Justice is people should pay attention, because it was one of the most corrupt things that I think I've ever seen happen. Is Jim Justice, ran as a Democrat, got elected as a Democrat. So then he switched parties at a Trump rally, made national headlines, big news.
Yes.
But what people need to understand is that about a week before, a little bit, in the weeks leading up to his decision to change parties, the Trump administration killed a very, very important study that was commissioned. I think it was like a 10-year long study. And they had done all of the data collection, which was about half of the cost. And then they were getting into data analysis and putting together their report about mountaintop removal mining and the impact that it had on communities nearby. So the Trump administration, there was about a year left to compile this report. And this report is something that environmental organizations in West Virginia have been waiting on, have been wanting, because it's something that they can take into the courts to present as evidence that, yes, mountaintop removal mining does cause all of these things that we say it causes, and that there should be some sort of injunction put on mountaintop removal mining as a whole until they deal with it, put a stop to it, basically. This is what they've been waiting for, and to hold them accountable for the damage they've done in these communities. Well, that study was killed. And a week later, and it was for budgetary reasons, when it was going to be maybe $500,000 to finish the study, I think, and put that into context with all the money that the federal government spends, and that really tells you that that's a lie. So a week later, here's Jim Justice at this Trump rally making national headlines, giving Trump a boost that he could take this Democrat and turn him over to a Republican. When really the reason he turned over to a Republican is because Jim Justice is responsible for something like 66% of the mountaintop removal mines in all of Appalachia, Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, this whole area.
Also, wasn't he a Republican in the first place before Joe Manchin got him to run as a Democrat?
Yeah, so see, he was a Republican maybe up until like 2 or 3 months before he filed for governor.
Yeah.
And then it was like a few months into, maybe he might have made it a full year. I'd have to go back and look at the dates. I can't remember off the top of my head, but he didn't make it super long time as a Democrat once elected.
It's like a big scam.
Oh, it's 100% a big scam. The Democratic Party leaders knew this at the time. They knew who he was. A lot of us were speaking out against him, but once he won the nomination, it's kind of that thing where everybody who, a lot of those same people who were speaking up in the primary, they start being quiet and just rallying around the candidate and trying to get a Democrat elected.
You see that a lot. A lot of people who were really, really critical of Biden in debates endorsed him really fast and dropped out when Barack Obama called him on the phone.
That little girl was me, that was I remember watching that debate. I had a podcast at the time where we were covering Bernie Sanders, and we did a live show where we watched the debate and discussed it. And when she said that, I said, man, she just really went for it with Joe Biden. And then she's the running mate, like boom, right away. And, she was always the favorite. She was the one who had the Hillary donors meeting with her months before anybody was announced to run for the presidency.
She was the Hillary candidate.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
And
here she is.
And her failure to really catch on, even in her own state. I mean,
right. Well, whenever these people started announcing, I started putting together a list of just things that I would find on the news articles about them and kind of piece together what people are saying, pros, cons, just to kind of keep track of it. Hers was one of the biggest files I made just because the sheer amount of kind of hypocrisy that was going on out in California under her guidance. She says one thing and then she's got all of these people that she's keeping locked up who are likely innocent, but it's just like
oh yeah, I'm against capital punishment. Then why did you argue against abolishing the death penalty in California?
Right. Yeah, exactly. I wish I had that paper up in front of me now because it was pages and pages and pages of not just what I thought, but a documentation of what other people were saying too. And it was just really, really brutal.
And there's an interview where she's asked about a case that was considered a major failure of her office. And she blames it all on one records clerk. And it says, yeah, it turns out that she was an evidence clerk who was snorting a little too much of the evidence.
Well, I mean, it's just a classic cop-out, too. So you always have to find that person low level that you could put everything off onto. And then they just get to skate along and continue on. And then that person's life is probably completely ruined because Kamala wanted to make that statement.
Even if they're never convicted of any crime, if they're fired over something like that and as the scapegoat, then they're not going to work in law enforcement again.
No, absolutely not. And that's kind of, that's one of the things that kind of, to bring it back into West Virginia, that attitude of superiority, of that anything that they do is justified because they have some noble cause they believe in and they think that they must get it accomplished no matter what. That's kind of what drives a lot of politicians and a lot of
I'm going to be really, really cold-blooded and say that might fly if they ever did anything to actually achieve these noble causes. When they achieve some of these noble causes, then they can say, look at all the good stuff I did for you. Put up with my scandals and corruption. Because, that worked for FDR. A lot of corrupt machine Democrats were guaranteed a clean reputation and popularity because they were really cooperative with the New Deal and really made sure their people got taken care of. But now the corrupt people aren't even willing to buy their own voters off with a New Deal.
No, that's exactly, that's one of the things that I've always said is I would think, I don't understand it, that historically speaking, you want to give people a little something. You can't, to use the analogy of the carrot and the stick, you can't always use the stick. You've got to give people the carrot every once in a while. Otherwise, they're going to give up. It's like Charlie Brown and kicking the football. They're always moving the football. Eventually, we're going to learn to stop trying to kick the football. But you keep that football down a few times, you're going to hook people in for way longer because they're always going to think maybe this time I'm going to get the thing, because sometimes I get it. Sometimes they come through and they do something that makes my life better. And that's how you could really, and I'm not to help these people because it's nefarious to play it that way, because I think a lot of this is corruption. A lot of the reasons why you don't see people taking that action or discussing things in any real way, we're so focused on all these other issues. In West Virginia, every single bill practically has been some sort of social wedge issue that's used to just hype up the Republicans for the next election. They're not doing anything whatsoever except hurting people. So,
well, I mean, let's be honest. That's what Republicans do. Republicans use power to hurt people and to benefit. And the way it works is what they do that hurts a bunch of people benefits very, very few people.
Right.
The problem is that the Democrats don't help people. They spend all their time trying and failing to stop the Republicans.
Right. I see here, like, so I always relay things back to West Virginia, but in West Virginia, it's impossible to beat the Republicans when you're constantly chasing them. Every single action that they take is some form of capitulation to the right wing. I mean, the whole way that Joe Manchin wins is by running as a Republican, basically, and then the entire country suffers because he says, well, I'm doing what the people who voted for me want, or, and ask anybody who's outside of West Virginia, and they say it's just a great thing a Democrat could win.
In 2018, he ran that commercial promising with the shotgun, promising to protect people's pre-existing conditions and vote to save Obamacare.
Well, you got to remember, here in West Virginia, I don't know the numbers. This is from a few years ago. We were one of the states that benefited the most from the Medicaid expansion. We went from being somewhere around 30 in terms of states with healthcare coverage, like being 30th on the list, to somewhere in the top 10, because there are so many people who are living in extreme poverty who qualify for Medicaid, especially once the expansion came, and people took advantage of it. And you can't, even Joe Manchin understands that something like that, you can't go and run on taking it away from the people who are benefiting, because the people in West Virginia are some of the people who need healthcare the most. And it's still not universal. There are still a lot of people who are underinsured or uninsured completely. So that's kind of the state that we're in. So why would you take away from some place that doesn't have already? And I mean, I think that once the cat's out of the bag, so to speak, even somebody like Joe Manchin has trouble putting it back in, because he does have to appeal to some voters. And that's the thing to remember, is that at some point they always do have to go up for re-election. And if they go too hard on the people in their district, they're at a much higher risk than anybody who's fighting some culture war across the country.
Even dying John McCain didn't want to take people's health care away.
Truly. And then, I don't like John McCain. John McCain did terrible things to the Navajo people, and that's just
John McCain was a terrible person all around. His war heroism all starts after he got captured. So, I mean, no, I'm not trying. I don't want to go to the Trump degree where I say, I don't like people who get captured. That's taking it a little too far. Right. Because after he was captured, he did the right thing and was very, very heroic in the circumstances. At the same time, he was suspiciously close to the beginning of the Forrestal fire. The fire may have been started by a weapon on his jet misfiring. It may or may not have been his fault.
Mm-hmm.
It's just one of those things. Who knows? But so there's that. There's the fact that he got shot down and got captured, which means he was not necessarily the best jet pilot in Vietnam. And
I'm no military
then his
historian,
heroism starts. Then his heroism starts.
Right.
So, and I mean, obviously, I'm not in favor of what the U.S. military does overseas. But if military heroism is based on military achievement, John McCain didn't achieve anything in his military career.
Right.
He got captured.
No, exactly. You know, I know there was a guy from my area named Woody Williams, and I don't know anything.
And yes, after his political career started, he was one of the Keating Five.
Well, I mean, we could keep talking about John McCain. That's fine, because I'll tell you something else about John McCain is that the way that Republicans reacted to his vote for health care kind of solidified him as this pseudo hero to Democrats. And, you know, you got all of these people that right now Democrats like to kind of praise: Liz Cheney, John McCain, and these figures that are really problematic. And, you know, one of the things that I'm worried about, if you look at the way Mitt Romney has been attacking that fringe element of the Republicans, you know, there's a very good chance that if he runs for president, he could win over a lot of people. And this guy that in 2012 everybody was very concerned about for good reason because of who he is and what he believes in is you know, looking like the most rational person in the party now.
Well, what's really scary is there isn't a lot of actual difference in Mitt Romney's politics and Joe Biden's politics. Obviously, Mitt Romney is willing to do things to cooperate with the worst Republicans, but Joe Biden did that too. Let's not forget that when Obama, as president, was trying to negotiate a budget with the Republicans in the Senate that would repeal the Bush tax cuts, Biden brought Obama a deal that made the Bush tax cuts permanent and then basically did Mitch McConnell's work for him in convincing Obama this was the best possible deal and he should take it.
Oh, yeah, you're not going to get an argument from me on defending Joe Biden, by the way. I completely agree. Yeah,
I'm just pointing out. So, I mean, the scariest thing about President Joe Biden is that President Mitt Romney doesn't scare me that much anymore. Because really, What's the fundamental difference between Mitt Romney and Joe Biden?
And I wonder how long it takes before the Republican Party completely cedes itself to the Trump, Marjorie Taylor Greene faction. And, you know, the Democrats fully embrace the Mitt Romney, Liz Cheney's.
Well, the Democrats have already embraced them.
Exactly. And they do that now. And, you know, I think that's
so. Remember,
where do people on the left have anywhere to go? So the Democrats have been trouble for a long time. You know, that's clear, but it seems getting worse.
Remember when George W. Bush was definitely considered to the right of Mitt Romney? George W. Bush has been completely rehabilitated by the Democrats now.
Right. Yeah.
So they absolutely would have no problem whatsoever with Romney. Their dream is Mitt Romney running for president as a Democrat right now.
That's what I'm getting at. Eventually, we're going to see some of these sane, rational, pragmatic Republicans, whatever word they're going to come up with, as kind of this unifying force within the Democratic Party, trying to solidify its place as that centrist party. And it just leaves a lot of us on the left really struggling to get anything.
It's already like that. Remember the Lincoln Project?
Mm-hmm.
Remember Rick Wilson and Steve Schmidt and the other MSNBC's favorite Democrats?
Well, yeah, I mean, clearly this is what we've been talking about for a long time. Yeah.
Sorry, MSNBC's favorite Republicans. While those specific guys aren't on every show anymore, those kinds of Republicans are still on every show.
Right.
The Never Trumper has become, the Never Trumpers were the reason that Joe Biden was the Democratic Party nominee, among other things. the Never Trumpers convinced the DNC that Joe Biden was the only possible candidate who would win over Republicans who didn't like Trump.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the Democrats bought that. Whether it was true or not, the Democrats forgot that. And no, this is not true. Nicole Wallace is not the token good Republican now. First, Nicole Wallace isn't a Republican anymore. I believe she is a Democrat now. And second, she talks about how much more liberal the Trump administration made her in a way that I'm not saying that I'm a fan of liberals. I'm just saying Nicole Wallace is reasonably convincing. Their token Republicans now are usually guests, but they're guests that show up a lot. Sarah Longwell is very popular. You see her a lot.
I don't know much about these pundits, to be honest. So
no, that's fair. These are all
you.
Lincoln Project people. I mean, that's the main thing to remember is that the odds are if you see a Republican on MSNBC these days, unless they're deliberately there to be the quote unquote conservative voice, they're there to be because MSNBC sees those Republicans as fellow Democrats now.
Yeah, great point. And that's just, like you said, it has been going on for a really long time. And a lot of people on the left have been telling people that that's where we're headed. But it's also really important to try to stop. I mean, I know you're not a Democrat, but I'm still a registered Democrat, though I'm not a real party person. I don't believe in the Democratic Party. I just haven't changed my registration. But it would still be nice to not have those people be involved in that party. Just based on where we came. I mean, I don't think a lot of people anymore think back to what it was really like under George Bush and the people that we knew that died in Iraq and Afghanistan and the way that they lied us into that war and just the animosity. And I hate to say the hatred, but that anger that built up in all of us throughout that Bush administration, just the constant way that they lied to us and caused death and destruction for, I don't know about you, but I knew quite a few people who ended up dying over there. And that's something that,
and not just lied to us. Let's not forget that they prosecuted reporters for not saying who their sources were.
Oh, I mean, it was, yeah.
There was all sorts of stuff going on under Bush that was bad. And while Bush was in office, we talked about that stuff.
Yep.
But then the Obama administration did worse things to reporters.
The thing that, and that's one of the things that it bothers me to no end is because I was one of the people in 2008 that bought it hook, line, and sinker. I said, this guy is legitimate. And it was just like a series of disappointments until Trump got elected, basically. And it disheartened a lot of people, and it's changed the way that we come with the things that are approached. I don't know how else to word that. I've not thought this through to form a real statement. It's just kind of depressing to watch that anti-war movement and all of that momentum kind of got poured into Obama, into this force that people thought would be a catalyst for change. And it just never happened. And I think that was one of the things that did a lot of harm to
and all the anti-war Democrats became pro-war Democrats once Obama won. And I'm not just talking about in Congress or in the cabinet or Obama himself. I'm also talking about people on television who advocate for the Democrats.
Yeah.
Some very anti-war voices really changed their tune after Obama became president, and those that didn't lost their jobs.
Yeah. No, it was one of those things where it was eye-opening to me. That was my first election. I was 20 years old when Obama ran in 2008. And so that was my first election where I got a vote for the president. And it was just one of those things where it was I don't know how to say it other than I keep saying disappointing, but that doesn't properly portray what it is that was really happening under the scenes for a lot of people my age who grew up in that setting, where 9/11 happened when I was, I don't know, 13, 14, and just watching that, the people that I grew up with, older people started off with, and then people my age going off and fighting in this I don't want to say pointless war, but that's because it's more than that. It was a war fought for profit. It was one that we were lied into, and people were manipulated into supporting it after 9/11. It was something that shook the very foundation of my life and shaped my my beliefs, my political beliefs in the way that I've moved forward. So to me, I guess that's why I make such a big deal about it. And I know that to everyone else, it's like, of course, George Bush could always have come back over to be a Democrat because it's never been serious, because history will tell you that. But it's just one of those things where it says it's what I believed in 2008, and to see it happen in that sense, we had this major war. It was a big deal at the time, and the way that it's been discounted and the way that people are foaming at the mouth now, when they shut down that Chinese balloon over South Carolina, the videos, one lady screams, "Woo, that's my Air Force," or something. And it's just like, okay, I can understand shooting it down, but I can't understand this excitement, this jubilation for the prospect of shooting down a foreign object out of the sky, or that means that we have more military firepower. It's like, yeah, we've been putting that on display for the past 2 decades, killing and displacing millions of people in the Middle East. So I'm not screaming and hoorahing whenever that happens. I'm just not.
So here's a question. What happened to the media blackout on UFOs? Because remember, they used to not take any sort of UFO news seriously. They never gave it any sort of credence except on weird paranormal shows or fiction. You only saw the idea of UFOs taken seriously in fiction or in really weird In Search Of style.
Right, the History Channel, Ancient Aliens type shows, right?
Before that, but the same kind of stuff.
Well,
definitely.
yeah, I mean, and it's always been like a pop culture thing since the sightings started happening, right?
In the 70s, Leonard Nimoy did a show called In Search Of, and they had episodes like In Search of Atlantis and In Search of Ancient Aliens and all sorts of stuff.
So that was kind of the precursor to the genre.
That's Search of UFOs.
Well, and the thing, I got to say this honestly, as somebody who, just from a general point of view, I enjoy fiction books about aliens and horror type things. But UFOs are fantastic. I like Bill Burns too.
So,
it's interesting.
My question is that the guy on Ancient Aliens who makes me believe in aliens because he looks like a Centauri from Babylon 5, or am I thinking of the wrong guy?
This guy, that guy, the one he's talking about, is an older guy. He's got gray hair. I'm not sure.
Gotcha.
There's so many people on that show. And
there's a guy from Ancient Aliens who ended up in a meme, and his hair makes him look like one of the Centauri from Babylon 5.
I don't know his name. I don't know these people's name, but I will say this. One of the things that I found interesting, because the whole topic interests me, okay? I do enjoy it as a pop culture thing, as just as a form of entertainment. But I am not somebody who's going to say.
Back to where I was going though. There was a media blackout on UFOs. They didn't talk about that stuff seriously. A current affair or Geraldo was the closest to legitimate news UFOs or something like Roswell ever got. Right. And then somewhere recently, because it started while Trump was still president, they started talking about UFOs in the regular media. The first one was about Trump releasing files on UFOs, or wanting to have it released, but the Air Force not releasing it, and so on. And then they started talking about the Chinese weather balloon. Now, let's not forget that various sorts of balloons have been the scapegoat for UFO stories for many years. So talking about UFOs at the same time the weather balloon is taking it for a spy balloon is very suspicious.
Look, here's one thing that I have to say honestly: the coverage of these things that have been shot down has ranged from they're absolutely balloons. They're less sophisticated than the Chinese balloon that we shot down. They're just these things that probably have been in the sky a lot and we haven't noticed them because we haven't been looking for them. Whatever. But the thing that really bothers me, the thing that bothers me the most is the way that you'll see like CNN, two different stories. One of them paints this picture that these objects are mysteries. They're interfering with pilots' sensors. They don't know how they're being floating in the air. They don't look like they should be able to stay up. All of this weird stuff, and then a whole section devoted to talking about the recent UFO news that's come out. And then there's another one where they're talking about these things as though they're just normal, small instrumentation attached to balloons or whatever it is, and they're meaningless. So to me, that's what really bothers me. I don't know why they're talking about UFOs all of a sudden. I don't know why that's become an acceptable topic, but the way that they shifted between the two and that they're playing both sides in a way that's really dangerous whenever.
So the media always plays both sides that way. However, I will say that it's interesting that we're seeing them play both sides on UFOs. Because when you start getting into UFOs, and this is true, by the way, UFOs are good cover for black projects. The high point of the UFO site, of the legitimate UFO sightings by the military, was during the period that the U-2 was flying over the Soviet Union from various bases, and the U.S. wasn't telling anybody about this. It was still a secret. So until the first U-2 was shot down, the Air Force pilots who are reporting these unidentified flying objects were probably seeing CIA U-2 flights and were not able to get it in. And the Air Force was investigating because they were worried it was Russian, but the CIA was not letting them find anything out because it was the CIA's top secret U-2 project that no one was supposed to know about.
Right, and that's exactly what it is. And so with these newer objects that they shot down, the three that they're saying weren't related to China whatsoever, probably, my immediate thought is some sort of private company doing some sort of testing, rogue testing, just because they've been doing it and been getting away with it. So I'm interested to see whether we'll get information that that's the case, whether they're going to try to keep it secretive and keep people. I mean, they had a press conference where they're talking about UFOs, and rather than outright saying, no, they say, we don't believe this had anything to do with extraterrestrials. It's surreal in a way. And I don't know what's going on. I don't know if we have some sort of new military tech we want to unveil so we can send it to the Ukraine and make tons and tons of money for weapons contractors. I don't know what the ultimate goal is, but it does seem like there's been this shift in talking about traditional planes, traditional weapon systems, into putting this idea out there that, there's something else. There's a possibility that there's something else. And whether these balloons that we've shot down now are anything to do with that or not, that story has been coming out more and more over the past few years. And there's a reason for it. And I'm guessing it's because of that.
They want people to be distracted, I think.
Well, that too.
Because UFOs are interesting. And if the media is talking about UFOs, the media is less likely to be talking about either arresting Trump or about Biden's own failings.
Yeah, what happened to that? I mean, I thought Trump was getting arrested here pretty soon. That was supposed to happen. That's waiting.
Gone away. I mean, people still occasionally talk about some of it, but I mean, I don't hear anything. I don't see any sign. It's just like it always has been. Somebody says they're going to get him soon, and then they don't get him. How long have we been playing this game now? What did you say about Charlie Brown and the football?
Right. They always leave it down once in a while. Give us Trump. That's a great football. I'll take it. I mean, is it the best? Maybe not, but boy, it would be satisfying because there's just one person. I've always said this. He just annoys me. I don't like the guy. So he's a great place to start because that's the case for a lot of people. Let's start chipping away at that taboo, that social taboo of going after old presidents, former presidents.
Yes.
Let's start with him.
He's perfect because, nobody likes him. You could justify it, but then you've got a precedent for going after all the rest of them.
It's beautiful. And like I said, anybody who's listening out there from the Department of Justice, go after Trump. It's the simplest way to prove that it would honestly, especially just thinking about it going into 2024, it would be a really strong way to keep the corruption that was Trump and that was going on in the forefront of people's minds. And so it would have that added benefit. So maybe the Democrats could use it as a way to, oh, we're great, they're corrupt. But it would also, like you said, it would be a way to get our foot in the door of going after other presidents, other war criminals that were involved in past administrations as well, because they're everywhere.
That there are presidents who have committed crimes, not even just the war crime stuff.
Oh yeah.
I mean, so best place to start is the whole reason that Gerald Ford pardoned Richard Nixon had nothing to do with the Watergate burglary and everything to do with the corrupt campaign financing scandal that John Mitchell went to prison for covering up.
Right.
And there were lots of crimes related to that campaign financing scandal that Richard Nixon could have been charged for. And that's the biggest reason he was pardoned. Now, how many presidents have not engaged in that same kind of campaign corruption as Richard Nixon since then, with nobody even asking whether it might be a crime?
I was, let me just say this. As somebody who's worked on campaigns, campaign finance law is an absolute joke. There are so many cases that I know of not, I wouldn't say like purposeful impropriety, but things that probably aren't reported right. But the consensus usually is that's not going to raise any red flags. It's mostly right. Just go. So that's pervasive throughout the entire system.
And that's really a big part of the problem. One of the biggest and most unfortunate parts of the Watergate scandal is that now Richard Nixon wouldn't even be impeached or have to resign because it would all be legal dark money and there wouldn't be anything to cover up.
Right. So, and that's one of the amount of dark money that's involved in politics is one of the things that causes all of the trouble. Bring it back to West Virginia for me here, because it's, my wheelhouse is that they have that's what's fueling a lot of the strife within the party right now and within political organizations too, is the money.
Yes. And this is a good point. The only problem with going after Trump would be uncomfortable for all the other politicians doing crimes. So it's best to never let this happen in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's a big part of the problem. Thank you, Connor.
I mean, I think that actually that's the entire, that sums up the entire reason that politicians in charge of these investigations. I mean, let's face it. The president runs the DOJ to a certain extent, and that's why they don't go after them.
This is why corporate lobbying has made Richard Nixon's crimes legal as long as you hide them properly. And as long as everybody follows all the rules about hiding and stealing the money, it's legal to steal it.
Right. But that's because the people who write the laws are the ones who are trying to work around the laws. So it's the same thing that's, that I wrote a thing about Robert's rules and the way that people weaponize the rules against mostly marginalized, uneducated, the people who are not in power, basically, in all of these, from, your political organizations, your 501c3s, whatever it is, your nonprofits, into the organizations and committees within political parties. Most of these places use some form of parliamentary procedure, usually Robert's rules. And these rules are written and everybody uses them, but the interpretations vary wildly from organization to organization. And you'll find that it tends to favor the people who are chairing, leading the discussions, pushing the policy.
Well, that's because, whoever decides who gets recognized, whoever is the chair, is sort of the one interpreting Robert's Rules of Order.
Right. And it's there was somebody who said something about it. It's the whole point of these things is to make sure that people find a way to communicate and reach a consensus.
Yeah.
And when you use these rules as a weapon to fight back against the consensus and to hide behind and to say, well, we can't do that. We can't do that. Then you're manipulating the body as a whole. And like, that's what really causes a lot of the trouble. And that's how rules, not to be like this, but rules are made to be broken, and they're made to be broken for the people who wrote them. And so the people who write them, okay, so they don't like this certain way it's written. We change it just a little bit, and we got a nice loophole here where it gives us cover for taking this money while it looks like we've done a lot to prevent it. And so they get that added benefit,
for using one committee to seat a whole bunch of people on another committee, and somehow that ends up with all those people seated on that other committee taking over the party.
Yeah, when you're in West Virginia, anything's possible, and I'm glad you brought. I'm glad you brought that up. I've been writing a series of articles trying to explain what's happened in West Virginia.
That was a brief summary of what I got from the article you wrote on that most recently.
Well, because whenever I came into the former Indigenous caucus and got involved in the party, I got a crash course on Robert's Rules. I bought the book, I read the book, and I came at it my own way. I took my own interpretation into the meetings and kind of fought back. And so that kind of set the stage. But what I came to find out was that a lot of the people in this committee that I had come on to, they work with a group who's called the People for Democratic Party Reform. And there's an entire video out there where the woman who now chairs the Affirmative Action Committee, the white woman who now chairs the West Virginia Democrats Affirmative Action Committee, is in this video talking about ways to take interpretations of bylaws and Robert's Rules to take over parties and political organizations. And it's basically just to bombard people through their grievance process, question everything until you've overwhelmed them to the point where you get concessions just so that you go away. And that's how the AAC was actually formed. They did that to the DNC through saying that West Virginia wasn't living up to its end of the bargain. And they had so many grievances filed that the DNC, the state party of West Virginia, and the people who filed all the grievances, the reformers, signed a memorandum of understanding granting some rules changes to West Virginia. And that's how they got the headway into the AAC. So the entire thing started from this group whose whole thing is changing rules and weaponizing rules to take over parties. Yeah. So when I came into this group, it wasn't something that I knew. I came into it just to be the Indigenous Caucus chair and work with everybody very naively. So it was over the course of a couple of months, these people kept popping up, and I kept doing more and more research that I found this out. And so at the time when they're weaponizing the rules against us, I don't realize just how nefarious and how calculated that is. And as time went on, people sent me emails where the woman who works with People for Democratic Party Reform, the now chair, she's writing scripts for chairs from other caucuses, for the chairs of the AAC, down to parts where she says we're going to limit discussion to expedite the process and get through the meeting. And we ask you not to ask any questions during this time. I mean, basically telling the chairs ways to silence the people. And then there was a meeting of a subcommittee where one of the people who's funding this whole operation here in West Virginia, Harold Ickes. I always talk like a rambling person, but this is important. Harold Ickes Jr., who was the deputy chief of staff in Clinton's White House.
Clinton's garbage man.
The garbage man, Harold Ickes. He was involved in a lot of these subcommittees that Black and Indigenous people were denied membership on. And in one of these meetings, he was unaware that Mary Ann Claytor, the chair of the Black Caucus, was sitting in listening. And he said to the committee that he had advised the then parliamentarian and secretary, Selena Vickers, the now chair of the AAC, to silence.
You go first.
Well, he said in this meeting that he advised her on how to silence. He said Seth and Mary and the rest. So that was me, Mary Ann Claytor, and then the rest of the committee. It might have been Marion. I'm sure Marion Clater would say he said her name first. Whatever. Anyway, the point of the matter is that he admitted in this meeting that he had advised this non-member in ways to silence minorities on this committee, and they never would release the video. The video was being recorded. It was announced at the start of the meeting that the video was being recorded, and the state party, when we filed a grievance against these people, asked for the video to be released. We sent countless emails, had other people's, like, they would just never release this video, and I'm pretty sure it's been destroyed. So we're talking about people who explicitly stated that their goal of silencing minorities, and it was a way for it's kind of like digital blackface, but it's not just digital. I don't know. It's not like they're actually putting on the makeup, but they're taking the identities, the struggles, the words, and the intellectual property of the minority members of that committee while trying to silence us and push through their own agenda. So whenever, somebody like the former chair Belinda Biafor speaks up against these white folks on the committee or says anything, they are able to use the power of all of these minority caucuses to claim this moral high ground while throwing us under the bus, while taking away our what's the word? I'm thinking of a word, our agency. They're taking away our agency and our ability to represent our groups on these committees. So that was the entire thing, is that they had a goal, and that's through this committee. They got 8 seats on the executive committee for the party, which isn't nothing. I mean, that's a sizable chunk of people. And so they put up their people and got it through. And now the AAC is largely silent. They don't do any of the work that they started out doing. And because they accomplished what they wanted to accomplish, and that was to prop up this cadre of white progressives who really are just seeking power, and they want to be the ones to take control of the party. I only say that because of the tactics that they used. You can't use the same racist tactics and the same exclusionary tactics and claim that you're wanting an open party. You're claiming that you're wanting to increase diversity. You're wanting to take control of a narrative, and it's beyond offensive. One of the first things before I ever joined up with the Indigenous Caucus, there was a Rules and Bylaws committee for the DNC hearing for credentials for some of the people from the state party in West Virginia. And the now chair of the AAC, Selena Vickers, who represented the reformers at all those past grievance hearings, was representing them here and was fighting against Belinda Biafor. And one of the things that she said was that there was an election for parliamentarian for the whole party or something. And at the time, it was a black woman who was the parliamentarian. And she made it a point to say that the person she nominated was Native American. And I wrote her an email after this. This was well before I decided to join the committee. And I knew Selena. I've known Selena for years. And I wrote her and I said, I want you to know that as a registered member of the Navajo tribe, it was offensive that you said that this woman has no tribal affiliation, but still claimed her indigeneity, first of all. But secondly, the more offensive thing is that in order to justify going up against one minority person, you had to make sure that people understood that the person you supported was also a minority, which is that form, like I'm talking about, like that was the first time that I told her that I felt like she was using the identity of minorities to further her own personal agenda. And that kind of set the stage for the animosity going into the committee.
And when someone criticizes identity politics in any sort of good faith, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about that bad faith uses of identity as a weapon to claim moral high ground.
Right.
Now,
and when pushed, there's no, this is also worth remembering, is that when pushed, this woman that she nominated had no ties to any tribe. There's no proof that she's indigenous whatsoever.
So we're just saying what we want to say in order to make a point about our diversity when we're just lying.
Exactly. And so, that's kind of where all of this started. And the AAC started with with a really hostile meeting between the state party
Is
and these members of the AAC, and it caused this whole. I don't want to get too much into it, but it caused this whole backlash about the WVDP, the Democratic Party here, being racist. Which, okay, but the issue is that the people that they're saying were harmed went on to do a lot of harm themselves, and that's kind of what I've been wanting to expose is this. And it's not even just, I don't know that I'm looking to, I don't even know what I want to accomplish other than to empower the minorities that are here in West Virginia. There's like 65,000 people, according to the census, who are minorities. Very few, but it's a population big enough that we need protection, and that if we work together, we could do a lot of organizing our power behind issues, behind candidates, and be a force to really be reckoned with. So my goal ultimately, I feel like I'm losing my voice here. I apologize for that. But my goal ultimately is to bring all of these different people together and empower them in some way. I don't know if it's anymore, honestly. A year ago, I would have said, yeah, I'm trying to get people involved in the Democratic Party because that's what I was actually working to do. Now my goal is just to get people involved in some form of, community action at this point, whether that be a political party if they think they can make a change, whether that be helping to organize a mutual aid network. Like there's so much that needs to be done. Community defense is another thing I think that we've talked about privately in some regard. There's a lot of work that needs to be done that requires a lot of on the ground organizing. And so my main goal is not to push people to a party or to run for office or anything necessarily like that anymore, unless that's their strong suit. I think that we have to start working together and fighting where we can fight, how we can fight to make life better for people so that we can, educate people more about what needs to be done electorally.
I think organizing communities for mutual aid and mutual defense is the number one thing. And as much as I hate belaboring it, I think it's the number one thing because things are going to get worse because they're going to get better. And we're going to need those aid and defense networks. Yes. Our goal should be to have some sort of people's city council based on the Black Panthers in every neighborhood, in every city at a minimum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And these local groups can work for local issues in ways that potentially give them power in state politics in the future by cooperating.
Exactly. So this is the thing that everyone talks about decentralization of everything, right? And to me, that's always a good idea. So what I've been advocating for here lately is like, if you look at my Substack, or if I actually ever put out anything on YouTube again, I usually focus, I might try to relate it to people who might see it from other states because these issues are largely universal. But I try to keep my focus on solutions in particular to what I know here locally in West Virginia, because that's the impact that I can have the most, where I can have the most impact is here locally. And so the more people who get involved in reporting on their local issues, getting people in their community to be concerned citizens, to be engaging in civic activities, whatever it is, whether it's going to your town council meetings, whether it's holding politicians accountable, whether it's running for office, working with mutual aid networks, starting a mutual aid network, whatever it is that you can do, whatever your strong suit is. It's just a matter of actually getting to the point where you want to do the work. And it's not like that thing where you pull yourself up by the bootstraps. This is a communal effort. This is something that makes communities better. And it's just that work that needs to actually be done. This isn't like working for somebody to make money for yourself or to make them more money. This is something that we can do that makes the world and our communities better. And when you can do something that makes a difference locally, you feel that the gratification that you get comes more quickly because you can see the impact that you're making on people's lives immediately whenever you focus more locally. So, I know a lot of people, and, you see this a lot. I get kind of caught up whenever I'm on Twitter and stuff, because you'll see a lot of people who just want to clout chase. They just want to see, like, they want to get attention. They want whatever it is, but they're not actually out there really putting out any work to make any changes that are going to make anybody's life different.
True.
And so I think that that's what we really need to focus on. And it's the same thing that we tell, I'm saying about the Democrats. Democrats, you want people to actually vote for you, you have to do something. Well, this is the same kind of idea. So whatever political party rises up from the need for this third political party, or fourth or fifth or sixth, whatever starts rising up, I really hope that people will take advantage of it and utilize the power that we can form through this organizing mutual aid and defensive networks in our communities to build these strong communities to where, the whole point of government is to have representation. So if you have a strong community where you know everybody, then you're going to basically know who you want to represent you. So it's kind of like this entire shift in the way that we look at things. And for me, in West Virginia, this seems a lot more doable because communities are much smaller. So I understand that somebody hearing this who's living in the middle of a larger city is going to say, yeah, that sounds simple. But that's the point, is that each person has to look at what you can do individually. So what I'm saying is I believe has the potential to impact life in West Virginia and people's lives in West Virginia, and to provide this rallying point to organize future political leaders around. What it looks like in your neck of the woods is going to be determined on a lot of factors that only people around you are going to know. And that's kind of the point, is like, get involved where you're at, do the things that you can do. And, that's what I'll always push for. And that's one of the reasons that if you see me complaining about things, sometimes it'll be about people coming. I really don't like when people come into West Virginia, because there's so much that people don't understand about this state. And they discount the potential that's here based on what they know. And I'm not saying that what they know is wrong. I'm just saying that there's more to the story. And I think that there's a lot of potential here. And there's a lot that's not being reported that, may in the future lead to bigger and better things. I know that there are some smaller organizations. I know I'm working on a few things and with some people. So, over the next 10 years, what West Virginia looks like is largely up to people who are willing to put in the work. And
let's remember, I say people, city council in every city because I'm a city boy, but we need rural organizing too. I know that one of the things from West Virginia that is from both speaking with Seth and speaking with some other people, one of the things they complain about in West Virginia is people from Charleston. So I get that it's not just important to talk to people in cities. You have to organize in your neighborhood, even if your neighborhood is rural, because you're the one who's going to know what issues your neighbors can organize around out there that will still help the cause.
Exactly. And it also, it's one of those things where it really helps people to feel more connected. I don't want to undersell that point, because a lot of activists feel like they're not actually doing anything. Even like I've spoken to several who just basically have stopped doing anything because they just don't see the point in it. So if we get more organizations that are more focused on really benefiting the neighborhoods where they're from locally, I think that you could get a lot of people more engaged. And I think that would benefit national organizations that are organizing as well, because there is a place for it. There's a place for everything if done correctly. And it's just about holding people accountable. I don't necessarily know that there's any organization out there that's completely trashed, not Democrat, Republican. I'm talking about, I'm not going to say that there's not, because there are some that definitely are. But I think that you could take I think that there's a lot of good in these organizations. I think that most of the time within these organizations, rank and file, people really do believe what the leadership sells them. So even if there's a corrupt leadership, I think that there's a base there of people who have mostly good intentions, who are the people we should be rallying and getting behind the ideas that we're talking about here. They're the ones who can do the most change and affect the most change in the most places.
No, I definitely agree. I remember that you said you had about an hour tonight, and we're a little over that right now. I have a couple things I want to cover on the stream, but if you need to go.
No, I was going to say, we never even got to the trans stuff or the abortion stuff, so I'm good for a few more.
Fair enough. Then let's go right to the fact that isn't West Virginia as we speak trying to adjust an abortion ban?
So yeah, we have one of the worst abortion bans in the country right now, and they're removing. I mean, I'm going to just go ahead and talk about it like it's been done, because it will be done. That's my guess. I don't see it not happening. So there's a bill advancing right now. Let me go up to my notes here so I can get the bill number. SB 584. It restricts access to abortion by eliminating the incest and rape exemptions and requiring surgical abortions to be performed in licensed hospitals. And it also adds restrictions to telemedicine. And it's just an all around way to make an already really dangerous abortion ban that put a lot of women in harm's way even more strict. So these restrictions or these exemptions that were in there are toothless anyway. So I think that the way the bill's written already, the rape exemption, it's like you have to get I don't want to say a conviction, but I feel like it's a conviction before, and there's no way to get it done before it would be viable to have the abortion. So it's not really there anyway. This is just them continuing to attack people's rights and to signal to all these conservatives that this is what we want to do. This is the route that we're going to take. We're going to go after people's rights, and you can join us. And it's scary. You're on mute.
We'll even close a loophole that we only meant for show in order to look good to our constituents.
And how does that make, I imagine the constituents that you're trying, that makes you look good, that you're restricting access to safe abortions for women and limiting these exemptions for people who have been raped and for victims of incest. It's really, truly evil.
Well, let's recognize two things, because it's important to understand how the other side thinks on some of these issues. And also because it's important to understand that some people can't be reached because of their position on some issues that you personally may think don't matter very much. Abortion is a really good example, because the diehard opponent of abortion isn't saying, I want to take the right to have an abortion away from people. That's not how they think of it. They think of it, I want to stop people from killing babies. Now, that's not what's happening, but that's how they see it in their head. And then you feel sympathy for them because they have this completely wrong impression. And because of that really wrong impression, they want to do what are bad things for what they see as good reasons. And then because we feel sympathy for them, we want to absolve them and tell them they're still good people, when the fact is that regardless of how it's justified, the simple fact is, and it's worse in a state like West Virginia or Mississippi than it is in a state like California or New York, but it's still a risk everywhere. Every time a woman carries a pregnancy to term, even before it reaches the stage of giving birth, she's risking her life. Every time a woman gives birth, she's risking her life. If she is Black, her risk goes up a lot. So when we talk about outlawing abortion, what we're really talking about is making more women risk death, which means increasing the number of women who do die due to complications of pregnancy or doing childbirth, which means we're killing women. But nobody wants to respond to, oh no, they're killing babies, by getting up and saying, well, you want to kill women. No one wants to say that.
Because at the end of the day, I mean, I think a lot of those people, they care more about those babies than they do the women. I mean, I think that what we're dealing with a lot of these people, and I might be reductionist, I don't know, I might not be giving them the same benefit of the doubt, but I think that what we're talking about is a lot of people who hold a lot of hate in their heart. You know, they want to control people. The fact that people will die in their mind, maybe these are the people who deserve to die. You know, it's that kind of self-righteousness that drives these people to make these decisions on behalf of everyone else. And to kind of tie it in, to these trans bills. It's the same exact thing. People will die. Period. There are going to be a lot of people who die from this, and it's something that, as a human, tears me up. I mean, it's something that like really bothers me to think about, to understand that there are these people out there that can for their own political gain, or because they harbor these bigoted ideas themselves, they can pass these votes that are going to they know what the outcome will be. I know what the outcome will be. They know what the outcome will be. And yeah, that's a great point too. I mean,
so this is important. This is important because this is something else I don't think people understand. Connor says, I don't think they care about the babies either. After all, they cut, snap, and chips as soon as they get the anti-abortion laws. And that's true. Now, there's a reason for this. Up until the point the babies are born, the babies are potential life. And it is wrong for anybody to do anything to prevent these babies from being born, because God wants them to be born. If God doesn't want them to be born, God will do something about it. So that's the first thing. They care about God's will, not the babies themselves, as part of that first step. That's absolutely important. The second step is where it gets worse, but they don't think of it that way. See, once the babies are born, as long as they're still innocent children, if they die, they're going to heaven. And their parents are bad people who deserve to suffer. Otherwise, they wouldn't be poor. Because God would never let good people be poor. Good people would be rich like us because we're good people. Now, that's not what their own Bible says.
You're not wrong. I'll tell you though, I went to 13 years of Baptist school, and I can tell you that they boil that down to, well, the people who are still poor are the ones who won't work. And the Bible says if you don't work, you don't eat, and you gotta write them off. You know, you do what you can for them, but it's not on if they're. But it doesn't take into consideration the systems that we live in now and the immorality of it.
Here's the challenge, because this is where I believe biblical scholarship needs to be more rigorous if we're going to argue with Christians, because we have to be able to jar them and at least ask questions that make people think about faith, even if the people we're arguing with never will themselves. So that first question is, okay, show me where Jesus says if they don't work, they don't eat. Because Jesus never says that. That's Paul in one of the epistles. And the epistles were letters that Paul wrote to other preachers about how to run churches. And there's a big difference between running a church and saying, well, if somebody's not pulling their weight in the community, they don't get the benefits of being a member of the community, and saying, well, poor people can work or they can starve. Now you're muted.
Right. That's a very good point. And that's one of the things that always bothered me. I mean, growing up in that Christian school was just the amount of justification that they could come up with for all of the terrible things they did. We had slave day at school where they stood us up on the desk and auctioned us off to the highest bidder. And then on the day of slave day, we had to do whatever they told us to do. It was humiliating, degrading, and it was meant to be. And the whole thing was to mock slavery. How do you even justify doing that whenever that's like one of the most anti-human things that one can do?
And this is a little belated, but welcome, Paula. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, Paula.
And yes, thank you. And this was when I was talking about women are going to die. And Seth chimed in that trans people are going to die because of the trans ban. And this is also true.
Right. And kind of, I don't mean to take over here, but just to kind of switch over into that topic, it's not just one bill for trans issues. I mean, we're talking, I got a list here: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 bills, all having to do with gender identity and gender affirming care and drag performances. But I count that with gender identity. And it's like, okay, guys, we're in a state where we have the highest proportion of trans kids per capita. Good God, most people should know somebody that they care about. What is going on in this state that you think that the people would rather you be out here doing all of this nonsense than to actually put in the work to make a difference in our terrible economy, terrible way of life, terrible health outcomes, blah, blah, blah. I keep going because what we have here is a lack of leadership, corruption that has infiltrated every part of government in our systems. And we have people that, like, we talk about the people that are going to die from these new laws. We already have people who are dying from the actions that these people have taken and are continuing to take and have, that's what we're dealing with on a daily basis. It's like every day is a new assault from the people at the top on the people at the bottom and how they're going to kill us. And if you live in West Virginia, if you live in Appalachia, it's not just West Virginia, but it's where I'm from. But if you live in this area, you see it every day. You see people and you live that trauma of loss because of where we are. And because you just aren't guaranteed anything. I mean, from people who work in the mines and who suffer mine accidents to the people who get cancer from living in neighborhoods where mountaintop removal's, one hill over and the carcinogens are just seeping into the water. There is just so much going on here, and all of it boils down to the same corruption and extraction of fossil fuels at the expense of the people who live here. And we're the ones who pay the price. Look at what's happening in Ohio with the train derailment, with the chemicals seeping into the Ohio River. That's right there it's right near the panhandle of West Virginia. It's just more and more of the same for the people that live in this Rust Belt in the heartland where everything is just kind of fallen apart. And the political leaders from both parties have let it happen. Nobody's out here really trying to make a difference in the way that people live out here.
And this is where I want to say that when you see LaRoucheites posting online, trying to bully you into going to their anti-war rally, they're helping to poison Paula and her neighbors.
Yes. Yeah.
So, because that's what they're defending when they say that global warming is fake. They're saying we need to keep poisoning people in Appalachia.
Right. And understand that the people, I'm in Marion County, West Virginia. I'm literally 10 minutes away from the Pennsylvania border. Okay. I'm not in the most West Virginia that there is. There are people living in these counties like Mason County, McDowell County. I could keep listing them, but they're very, very small. And to say that they're underfunded is not even doing justice to what's going on in these places. And people are having trouble living. They're having trouble, like, just in these areas, getting to grocery stores. There's food deserts. I mean, just every issue that you could think of that comes from living in a poor rural area, we're dealing with it here in Appalachia. And it's only exacerbated by the people who are coming in to extract the wealth and to pad their pockets and to make some, their Hampton's house nicer by getting a new decorator. I mean, that's all it's for.
I lived in East Tennessee, near the Virginia border, and something that people really don't like to say is that if you want to see what the television calls a third world country and conditions like a third world country, just go to any place that is or used to be coal country in Kentucky, Tennessee, Pennsylvania, Ohio, or West Virginia.
Yep. That's one of the things. I think a lot of people may or may not remember that there was a movie in 2010, I believe it was, The Wild, Wonderful Whites of West Virginia. And while it was sensationalized, it had a lot of nonsense in it and people made a joke of it. The underlying documentary about poverty in West Virginia is truly heartbreaking. And if you remove the sensational kind of poverty porn aspect of it, just the message of it is one that people should really take to heart, because it's been thrust on us. There are a lot of people in West Virginia who have they're not good people, but a lot of those people would benefit from education and from exposure to diversity. It's a lack of those things. And there is much, I don't want to say that they're victims, because if they're a bigot or if they're a Nazi, I don't have time for that, because whatever. But if there is a population out there that is just ignorant of the world because they're stuck in this pocket of death and poverty, well, I think that you could change a lot of people around just by exposing them to something different and helping their way of life.
There are a lot of people who aren't as bigoted as they think they are.
Right.
And will find it out. At the same time, I do think, and it's probably because of my age, and so I'm very, very strict in my thinking in this area. But my feeling is slavery has been abolished for a long time. The civil rights movement was something that happened before I was born, which is not to say that somehow makes it longer ago than it really was. It wasn't as long ago as we think it was. 1968 was only 9 years before I was born, which means it was only 54 years ago,
right.
55 years ago. So with all that in mind, then you have my thought tends to be is that everybody who could be reached should have been reached by now, which is not to say that there aren't reasons for some people not.
Well, and let me also just say this: when we're talking about people who are bigoted, and I don't think that's we're talking about still not a majority of people in West Virginia. I think that you would be surprised with the level of acceptance, but I do think that there are pockets of rage that comes from being poor.
Oh, I agree with that. And when you see, cardboard for windows, sewage and acid mine drainage into creeks, a lot of people don't have clean water to drink. This is all springs,
true. Right? You go to the mountain where there's a spring coming out, and you fill up jugs of water if you're lucky. I mean, yep. and that's what a lot of people even still today are using in places like Southern West Virginia. It is people who live in I don't want to say civilized society, because there are definitely civilized places, and I don't and it's not like that, but people who live in places where it's not as poor. And I mean, we're talking about even the towns that people are living in and the counties that they're from have no revenue. Okay, so we're talking about just not only them, but their government has no money.
Well,
it has a major impact on their way of life.
And I may be exaggerating it a little bit, but it's like there are whole counties in West Virginia where the only person with money is Don Blankenship and or Jim Justice.
Oh,
and they don't pay taxes.
Right. Right. And you got the legislature always wants to pass more tax breaks for fossil fuels. So it's like every session they want to find new ways to give away. And now they want to eliminate the property tax in West Virginia is one of the things that they want to talk about. Well, okay, you know what? I wouldn't have a problem if you had some sort of homestead exemption for people's primary residences. But when you're talking about capital, about tens of thousands, if not massive amounts of land that these companies are holding, where they're going to get an exemption now from paying any property tax on that to me is foolish.
Even there are even diehard libertarians, and I hate to say anything good about libertarians, but there are diehard libertarians who believe that the one fair tax is a tax on the value of land, because unused land is not productive to the economy. And therefore, if we want to encourage that the owners of property are productive, we must tax land at its value, and we must have penalties for unrealized value.
Mm. I mean,
Now, there are
I don't agree with their
bad
ideology, but hey.
there are bad directions where that could go.
Mm-hmm.
But the basic idea is that we should always be taxing the biggest property owners the most.
Right. Because, in West Virginia, I would like to see the numbers, but I'm pretty sure that the coal companies and the natural gas and, all the fossil fuel extractions, they own more land combined than I don't want to say than all private people, but it's a really large chunk of the state that they own.
Here in Oregon, the biggest landowners are Bill Gates, who owns all the farmland in America. I exaggerate a little bit, but not by as much as I would like to be.
Right.
And the lumber companies, because the lumber companies own large swaths of land, and in addition to places where they don't own the land, they own the trees. And the reason they own the trees is because those are state forests, but specific lumber companies have the specific right to log there in the logging season. So they're not allowed to own the land, but because they have to plant the trees after cutting their old trees down, they own the trees they plant and can cut them down as long as they keep planting more.
Well, at least they got a system, I guess. I don't know. And I don't know. That's an industry that's not really big here, so I've never done much research into it, and so I don't have much of an opinion on it. But it is problematic for lots of reasons to use public lands in that way, if nothing else. So, and it's this whole kind of I'm saying corruption a lot, but this relationship between the private and public sector that's really causing most of our problems, and that's where fuels a lot of the greed and where a lot of the money even comes from. So that is that kind of corruption that you can see, and that's obvious to people, because who just off the top of my head, who's getting to choose which companies originally got to plant trees in those areas or get the rights to the trees in it? Is there competition in the future for new companies? Is it just the state sanctioning this one person or this one entity to always be benefiting? I don't know. It's just, there's a lot of questions.
And then my big question becomes, if that is what is hurting people the most in West Virginia, what good will this trans ban do anyway?
No, it's literally just to kill people and to tell people and to use this word in the most deranged way possible, to virtue signal to those bigots who want to see people killed that we're your people. We're the ones. We will go after those people you hate. And as long as you keep supporting us in our collection of wealth and in our little game here, we're going to support you in your social wedge issues.
And one thing has to be mentioned every time that trans bans get talked about. When we're talking about trans bans, we're saying that these states are making it illegal for trans people to exist.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that they're saying, well, you can't do this. They're not making behavior illegal. I mean, the one thing you can say about sodomy laws is that people can choose to obey sodomy laws. It's still a law against what people are doing. So while it's obviously discriminatory and prejudiced, it's in the spirit still of the laws against what people are doing. When you get to the trans ban, you're passing a law based on who people are, and they can't change it.
Right. And one of the bills in West Virginia, just to make this, make a case for, make it clear, or make an example. One of the bills in West Virginia defines obscene material as and makes this whole obscene material bill. And in it, there's just this little thing that says obscene material also includes any. I don't have the actual bill in front of me, but it's something along the lines of basically it says anything to have to do with transvestitism, transgenderism, and like all these, these words that mean basically that you present as the gender other than what you were assigned at birth, making that obscene material. So a trans person within 2,500, you're making people illegal. So a trans person walking by a school could face criminal penalties, a felony of showing obscene material to children. Any presenting of yourself or affirming your own gender identity will get you labeled a criminal if this bill passes. This is the bill that will cause a lot of people with trans children to flee the state because it's going to, and it's written ambiguously too. The law is written so that it's hard to interpret. And basically that's why it's the same thing we talked about with Robert's rules earlier. It's written vaguely so that they can use it to persecute people, so that they can target people, so that they can go after them.
Yes, because if you spell out your persecution too specifically, you're breaking the law. Mm-hmm. But if you very carefully set up your discrimination behind a series of lies and bad faith false flags, all of a sudden it's legal again.
Right. Exactly.
And which brings me to the next thing that has to be brought up whenever we're talking about trans bans, and that is the books the Nazis burned. So when the Nazis as soon as the Nazis had power to do so, they led a large mob to the most advanced sexology, at the time the only sexology institute in the world, the most advanced healthcare center for LGBTQ plus people in the world. They burned it down. They killed employees. The doctor who owned it had to flee the country. The first trans woman to undergo gender affirming surgery disappeared and was almost certainly killed. And then they burned the books about how to do it again in the future. So when we're talking about these trans bans, we are talking about Nazi laws.
Right. And you see this, you're seeing the increase in Nazism, just where I'm at. I think I've talked about this even on this show before. Graffiti has started popping up a lot with Nazi imagery. So there are these groups that are starting to form and organize the way that, I'm talking about organizing, but they're organizing around hate. Their ideology is one of bigotry, hatred, violence against the people that they believe shouldn't exist. And that's what's so truly terrifying. And the trans people it's to me, it's not like a canary in the coal mine. I'm not using that analogy lightly here, but this is one of the first groups that's easily targeted. If you notice, one of the only, how many times have they tried to make bigotry mainstream again in the past 20 years? But the one that's really sticking, the one that really is getting in people's minds on both the left and the right, is the transgender issue. And they're milking that for all it's worth. I think that they want to foment that hatred in everybody and just kind of sow these seeds, because that's where a lot of their that Nazi ideology comes from, is stoking those flames of hatred in the citizenry so that they can kind of have carte blanche to do whatever it is that they want politically. And part of that involves killing people for sure, but it's not necessarily that that's what the leadership wants the most. That's what I'm saying is, like, I'm not saying that every legislator who voted for this ban really truly believes that that's the right thing to do, or that they want to see, that they have a personal reason to want to see trans people die. But I think that it's just that they don't mind sacrificing them if it gets them what they want. And that's dangerous too.
What it comes down to is they don't see it that way. Their thinking is such that if you already don't see poisoning someone's water as killing them, then you're not going to see a trans ban as killing people either. You've already compromised your sense of what legislators are responsible for. So as long as you're the one making it legal for people to kill them, but not killing them yourself, you're not actually responsible for their deaths. That's what our politicians tell themselves and each other. This is what our culture and media says. And this is what liberals say when they defend Democrats. Well, you're not being fair. He couldn't do that. Yes, but people died.
Right. Like, to me, as this is the thing that gets in my head, is that it's always about the humanity of it all. I mean, that's what Democrats want to run on. They want to be the ones who care about people's rights, about human rights, about being the ones to protect that. And for them to be the ones that often are throwing us under the bus at first go, here in West Virginia, like I said, we have, I mean, I'm exaggerating, I'm being hyperbolic, but we have like 5 Democrats that have been elected. I mean, it's not much more than that across both chambers in the legislature. So to have one of them come out against the trans ban, and then to have several of them come out in support of the abortion ban the last time, there's no opposition party. It's like, you want to watch what the GOP, you want to watch what can happen when the GOP has free reign. Keep an eye out what the West Virginia legislature is doing, because that's what's happening here. They have just the political capital to go crazy with all of the nonsense bills that they want. And, it keeps me from seeing what other bills they're passing. I'm sitting here reading through 10 transgender healthcare bans, and I don't have time to necessarily follow the other crazy things that they're putting through. I know Grover Norquist is here in West Virginia this week talking about eliminating the sales tax or the income tax or the property tax or some tax, because that's what they do. So we've got all of these social issues that to a lot of people are life and death. And then they're still doing these other things that aren't helping anybody. It's their agenda.
And so let's talk about this, because this is important. So we've established that people will die because of the trans ban. So when people talk about how culture wars are a distraction from real issues, you remember people are dying because of the culture war. It's a war with casualties, and the Nazis are not going to stop fighting the culture war because trans people stop defending themselves.
No, and I don't want to imply if I said anything that
I know
like
you
that,
didn't.
I didn't mean
I know
that.
you didn't. I'm
right.
saying this because this is something that gets put out there a lot.
Right.
If it is incumbent on us, in the name of the very working class solidarity that Nazis claiming to be socialists invoke against people, it is incumbent on us to stand up for the rights of trans people, particularly because we are working class, and so are they, and we need to have solidarity with them when they are being targeted by the liberal state. Unmute.
Well, this is one of the things that I say, is that whether or not your reason for supporting trans rights has anything to do with it being a personal issue for you. You might not know anybody who is trans, and it might be hard for you to connect with that. Okay, whatever. Look at the implications of these laws that they're passing, of the way that they're targeting these people, and what that could mean in the future for any other group. It's cliche now, because everyone, for a long time, if you compared anyone to the Nazis, it was a sure sign you were losing an argument. But then the Nazis have really ramped things up, and I think that it's fair to start saying that again, that we are propping up Nazis whenever we validate those.
I'm gonna go way out on a limb with a hot take. Then we can go ahead and wrap, because I think we've covered stuff pretty well. But I have a really hot take that I just have to lay out there. Godwin's law was always giving cover to Nazis. It's only recently that Godwin himself realized it.
You know what? And that's a really good point.
What made Godwin realize it was that, hey, this guy Donald Trump really is a Nazi.
It's not funny, but it is. Yeah.
And this is an important but. Ronald Reagan really was a Nazi. Ronald Reagan's top bundlers were retired Nazis from places like Ukraine and Belarus, living in Queens, bundling money for him from all over the country.
Yeah, well, that doesn't surprise me. That doesn't surprise me even a little bit.
And it was these groups that had entrenched Cold War interests who were most heavily dominated by Nazis. There were all these groups that had been maintained by the U.S. government since Truman. The most important being the anti-Bolshevik bloc of states and the associated League of Captive Nations. Now, there is still a Captive Nations Day in the U.S. to this day, and it's been disguised with lots of other things to not really understand what it is. But Captive Nations Day in the U.S. is a holiday in honor of Russia, of Nazis in what was then the Soviet Union who were fighting against the Soviet government. This was celebrated religiously in parts of New York.
Wow. Yeah, I've never heard of this. I mean,
this was a big deal in the whole country under Eisenhower. Eisenhower made a speech every Captive Nations Day. Presidents still make speeches on Captive Nations Day, I believe. We just don't call it openly the Captive Nations Day speech.
It's good. See, we're learning. If nothing else, we're correcting the PR mistakes.
But this is a holiday that honors anti-Soviet Nazis who were from the member republics of the Soviet Union.
Well, it's that, you know, and honestly, that's a great way to look at things too, because it's that idea that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, which is what a lot of people on the left, a lot of white people on the left, let's say it, have done with the war rally. I don't want to call it an anti-war rally, with this war rally that's happening in Washington, D.C. with the LaRouchites, with the Mrs. Caucus, with these people that are just problematic predators, anti-Semites. It's like,
now
that's the same kind of deal. That's the same type of people who celebrate the war.
Let's not forget that libertarians are people who support states that throw communists from helicopters.
Right.
So even before we get to the Mises Caucus, we're talking about people who want to kill us. The reason I say you can't talk about the Libertarian Party without making a Pinochet joke, which is what that throwing communists from helicopters is, folks. That's a Pinochet joke. The reason I say you can't talk about the Libertarian Party without Pinochet jokes is because their patron saint, Friedrich Hayek, when asked about Pinochet's political murders and repression, said that liberal dictatorships, by which he meant capitalist and friendly for American and European business, was preferable to totalitarian democracies. And by totalitarian, he meant a government that had enough control over the economy to keep American and European capitalists out.
Yeah. I mean, the whole concept to me of what's going on in DC here, what is it just the next couple of days. It's a week
President's Day.
It's a week from yesterday, right? Yeah, the 20th.
A week
the 19th.
From yes, a week from yesterday. It's President's Day. I believe it's the 20th. Let me look at my calendar. There we go. There's my calendar. I just want to see the calendar. Oh, I know where to go. I know where to go. There it is. Just takes me a moment to find it. All right. So Sunday is the 19th. and Monday is the 20th. So President's Day is the 20th, which is what I thought, but I wanted to look at the calendar and be sure.
Right.
So I'm going to be doing a show on Sunday the 19th about the rally. Renee Johnston is definitely going to be there. I'm trying to get some other guests as well, but it's definitely going to be me and Renee no matter what.
Good, because the people hosting this rally, they're not good people. So
the reason that Renee is my choice is both because she is a soon-to-be former Green now, and so she's in a good position to talk about Jill Stein.
Oh, right. Oh.
And she is one of the original group of Black people who were racially harassed out of the Movement for a People's Party some years ago.
So it's like somebody who actually understands the racism
so she is both
right.
So she is both someone who can talk about how she feels about the Green Party endorsing this rally as someone who's in the Green Party, and she can talk about why Movement for a People's Party is not a leftist organization, but is in fact a libertarian and therefore Nazi organization from her personal experience.
Good. We need more of that. I hope that people watch that. I really hope that I heard that there might be counter protests from BLM and some other groups. I would like to see that. I hope that nothing happens out there, but the group of people that's putting on this war rally seems particularly dangerous. And I don't say that lightly,
LaRoucheites in the past, specifically in the 70s, were attacking Stalinist and Trotskyist and socialist and communist groups of various stripes and beating them with baseball bats and hammers and breaking up their meetings and doing a lot of violence with the intention of making these organizations cease to exist, that they wouldn't be able to organize anywhere because they would be scared of being attacked.
Wow.
So literal terrorism.
Right.
Now, I do not condone violence, but I do not believe that groups like that are allies, and we should definitely not help them organize.
Right. I mean, if nothing else, that's the kind of the point, is that they're the leaders of this rally. They organize this rally, these people that are dangerous and that we want nothing to do with. So
technically speaking, Nick Brana for Movement for a People's Party and Angela McArdle from the Mises Caucus are the organizers. They own it. The corporate entity is in their names, not even owned by Movement for a People's Party with them as and the Mises Caucus with them as agents, but owned by them personally.
Oh, wow.
They're selling merch that's done by a company that makes merch for the cops. So if you're pro-cop, how anti-war can you be?
The more I even learn, like I come into this already opposed to it, and then you tell me new things while I'm here. That's like even more, like anybody who has any common sense who hears these things should know this is not an anti-war rally. These people are not anti-war. And besides, even if they are, with those people at the helm, what are we even going to accomplish with this rally? Let's say you get attention. The only thing you've done is legitimize and prop up people who are viciously dangerous to minorities and marginalized people. It's not smart.
And Nick Brana is someone whose organization can be safely called Nazi for the reason that they bullied their original brand of very leftist socialist volunteers out in 2017 and 2018. They bullied their Black membership out. They bullied they bullied the Virginia State People's Party out because they were pro-vax and pro-mask. And by that point, the Movement for a People's Party had gone anti-vax and anti-mask. And so the Jimmy Dore fans bullied the only group in the country ready to start a party out of the party.
Well, I mean, you don't want to go messing around with your grift by actually doing work like starting a party, which is what's happening. I mean, the whole point is that this is a con. It's a way to get money for these people and a way to increase their presence. I mean, it's not real.
Right now, Nick is the owner of this event, and Nick's father is the treasurer, to my knowledge, of the Movement for a People's Party still. If that's the case and his father is still treasurer, that means that someone extremely close to Nick is in charge of spending all that money. And that is money that would be called upon by any state party that actually came into existence in order to fund its operations. And who would that affect, and how would it affect them?
Very good point. I believe it would affect the Brahmas, from the sounds of it, the owners.
And that would be because they would have access to less money for their national organization because of the necessity of funding the state parties that were doing the real work.
Right. And so you could see that the work that people are doing is being tainted, is being sabotaged, the real work. So why would you even support these people? You take into account the bigotry, the false ideology, the anti-vax, the problematic stuff, and mix it in with the hypocrisy and just the actions of the owners.
Well,
I mean, it's clearly something that people should not be involved with if they appreciate integrity.
In all these cases, these decisions resulted in people who should have been the most valuable people in the organization leaving it.
Right.
So an organization that continues to self-sabotages like that in the first place, and then does so on an anti-socialist, then anti-black, then anti-vax level, that's doubly suspicious, even before they start inviting LaRouchites to their events.
Right.
And I believe at this point that Nick Bronnett is a LaRouchite, and I would have to be convinced otherwise.
I could get on board with that. I mean, what more do you have to see? The rhetoric, the people that they surround themselves with. I mean, if he owns this rally or the corporation behind this rally, and you look at the speaker list, that means that he's tacitly endorsed all of those people at the very least. And it's a really, really
that
bad
means,
list of people.
Officially speaking, he's invited all of those people, even if they're only responding to some open call to the event. As the organizer of the event, he's inviting them, which means if he then allows them to appear, he has invited them to his event. So that means the LaRouchites are there because Nick wants them there.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, even if that's clear because he owns I mean, he wouldn't have people there, even if it is an open thing. You still think, I mean, I would imagine that they still have a way to vet people and stop certain people from coming or whatever. I mean, it's not.
There are no actual communist groups there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, no actual communist groups would want to be there, but would they have included an actual communist group? I mean, who's the actual leftmost person speaking? Jill Stein?
From what I've seen, the speaker list, I mean, yeah, that's that. I mean, the whole thing, most of the people I've seen, when you research them, they're really not good people. I mean, there's pro-Putin people that are like, and not that I'm like vehemently anti-Putin or anti-Russia. It's not that. I just don't support any of this aggression or any of the death.
I'm not afraid to say that I am pro-autonomy for the people who live in the Donbass.
Right.
I am entirely for their autonomy, and nothing proves that they need their autonomy more than this war in the first place, because they have been caught between both sides. They are the people that the Nazis use for human shields, and they are the human shields that the Russian army shoots through.
Yeah, it's a mess. I mean, that's kind of the thing, is like, to be anti-war in this regard for me is what do we do to stop the immediate suffering, to stop the worst of this? And if that's some sort of negotiation, then that's some sort of negotiation.
If the UN were serious, if the UN were serious, they would declare that they would declare the Donbass a demilitarized zone and send peacekeepers in to keep both the Russian and Ukrainian armies out. If they were serious,
it's like they want this proxy war to continue. We've dumped so much money into it. The Europeans have gotten involved in it. It's become this whole thing, and I just don't see any. I don't see the chance for de-escalation anytime soon. I mean, not through these bodies.
This is how you know the UN isn't serious,
Mm-hmm.
because there are all sorts of people in let's be honest, what the West considers less important countries. All sorts of people in less important countries saying, we really can't give up the principle of self-determination for these folks in the Donbass, because that would undercut our self-determination in Africa or Asia too.
Right.
So they're not willing to go that far, and that sort of traps them, as far as the US would define it, in a pro-Russia position. That does not mean that they want Russia to win. It means that the US defines their position as pro-Russian because they cannot accept the principles that they would have to accept to declare Ukraine an innocent victim in all this.
I'm with you. Yeah. And like, so to me, that's the other thing about this anti-war rally that really has me concerned is like the whole focus of it is the Ukrainian war, when there are other places and other conflicts in the world. And I just don't understand what it is about this one that has them so worked up.
I understand it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was gonna say, other than what they said at the start of the war, whenever it was like, this is a European country, they look like us. And I think that's, I can't think of any other reason. And they say it's nuclear war or whatever. I get it, but
we really do need to wrap. But I will. When they say a European country, what they mean is Europe has been at official peace since the end of World War II, and at real peace, barring some exceptions in the Balkans during the breakdown of the USSR, since the end of the Cold War. These things don't happen in Europe. They happen in other places of the world where people are still like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they mean when they say European. That's a racist statement in and of itself.
Yes.
They're saying this doesn't happen in Europe. We're better than that, not like those other people on other continents.
Yep.
So that's number one. And then number two, they're just saying straight up, we care more about Europeans than people in other parts of the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. I mean, that's my takeaway. And so, I'm for anti-war. I'm an anti-war person. I'm not for this war rally myself.
So there was a rally last Friday. Not yesterday, but no, it was yesterday. There was a rally yesterday in DC for Lula and for democracy in Brazil. That was organized by Code Pink and the Answer Coalition and other real peace organizations. And there was no Libertarian Party or Movement for a People's Party anywhere near it.
Mm-hmm.
Why weren't they interested in that? Oh, libertarians support Bolsonaro. I forgot.
Right. It's selective. Everything is selective, and this is nothing but theater. Their war rally is it's that entryism thing. It's the way to convince people that they're rational, reasonable people who share the same beliefs and ideals that you do as a good American. We too are good Americans. Come see what we're about. And I believe that I saw something. There's some group that classifies the LaRouchites as a cult, that they brainwash people. And I can't help but think that this is like part of the plan is to convince people that this is a big anti-war rally. Come in, and it's just a recruitment tool in a way for a lot of these people.
It's recruitment drive, it's fundraising, and it's not for the anti-war movement. It's for the Movement for a People's Party, for the LaRouchites, and for the libertarians. And not even the best of the libertarians. Because it should be said, in their defense, the classical liberal caucus was going to pull out because of Scott Ritter. because they said he was pro-war and he's a pedophile and we don't want him there. And Scott Ritter pulled out. He whined about it, and he says he regrets pulling out, and he published his speech on a blog somewhere. But Scott Ritter pulled out because libertarians didn't want him there.
Well, and not to give praise to libertarians by any means, but the fact that they have that ability to stand up whenever they believe something is and put a stop to that whenever the People's Party
believed that person was pro-war, they said no, not that person.
Right, and that says more about them than it does about like the People's Party, who is having these speakers who are questionable in a lot of ways. I mean, Scott Ritter was far from the most. I mean, he was very problematic, but he's not the only problematic.
So if
speaker.
Scott Ritter is a convicted pedophile and a professional member of the national security establishment. So on those 2 points, he's extremely questionable. And yet at the same time, you're right, he wasn't even the most problematic person there. And that's terrible.
Exactly.
The most problematic person there is still Lyndon LaRouche's widow, Helga Zapp LaRouche.
And she is a speaker.
She is a speaker. And more importantly, she is the figurehead of the LaRouche cult. The actual running of the LaRouche cult as it exists now happens through the Schiller Institute, which is one of the sponsors of the rally, not one of the organizers, but one of the sponsors.
So they paid $500 to sponsor the rally, probably, right?
Yeah, something like that. And the Schiller Institute is not a big organization that lots of people have heard of, but it is the official remaining arm of the Lyndon LaRouche organization. The other half of the LaRouche cult was the LaRouche PAC. The LaRouche PAC ended up moving or trying to move in a marginally less bigoted direction and was denounced by Helga Zapp LaRouche and cut off from the favored circle.
And that shows you what's most important to her is the bigotry. So
yes.
Right.
And we're not talking about them saying, let's not be Nazis anymore, let's be communists. They're just saying, let's really roll back a lot of the most unbelievable stuff that makes us sound most wacky to even the craziest anti-Semites.
Right.
Because this makes us look bad even to other bigots.
Right, because that is a thing. I mean, there are plenty of people who are bigots who believe in their bigotry as some sort of moral, and that it's a moral belief that they actually have some sort of moral high ground or superiority to the people that they're bigoted against.
But they always justify it in those moral terms.
Right.
And some things go too far and are too obviously false and can't even be justified to other bigots.
Yep, exactly. And
it's like
those are the really out there bigots, and I would argue that they're the more dangerous ones. They're the ones that are more keen to commit those acts of violence that they fantasize about. I think most people who harbor some sort of bigotry kind of think about it, but I think that you really push the limits with some of these people in terms of their ability and their willingness to engage in that violence. And that's what we really got to be on the lookout for with these people. And so like, that's to the point about this particular group that's hosting this event, the particular people that are speaking and the ones that they're drawing in. To me, these are the ones that pose some of the most danger to marginalized people in the country right now, because they're so slick about it. They're trying
to say we need to punish marginalized people in the United States for the benefit of marginalized people in Africa. Now, well, they're not doing anything to benefit Africa. Because in their perfect world, when countries in Africa are given, as they see it, unlimited permission to burn fossil fuels, then what's going to happen especially if countries in other parts of the world do continue to move towards cleaner technologies in at least some energy areas, you're going to see heavy polluting industry all move to Africa. Because what does Larry Summers say? Africa is overpopulated and underpolluted. Those are his actual words.
Right. And here's the other thing too, is like most people aren't keeping up with this. Like you're telling me things here that is totally new to me. And I try to keep up with a lot of this stuff. And so like this is important for people to be aware of this group and what they're actually about and what they're doing. And I think that you're doing really good work in that regard. And I see a lot of people, on Twitter have been putting in the work to expose these speakers. And I really hope that continues on right through this rally. And I would love to see some sort of, if everything's done right and people can stay safe, I would like to see some sort of counter march on the day of that could counteract, that could just show that, and even bigger. It would be nice if it was bigger, but I'm not going to hold my breath because a lot of crazy white people are really excited about this rally. But, it's just like there needs to be an answer back to this, open bigotry and craziness.
In a perfect world, there would be a nonviolent way to disrupt the rally.
Yeah.
The trouble is, of course, even that's risky because we're dealing with a violent group.
Exactly. That's the point. You don't I can't understate this. We're dealing with people right now that are uniquely dangerous to marginalized people, everyday citizens.
Yeah.
The violence that they want to commit isn't against, the leaders. It's against you and me. And that's what people need to remember is like, we're their enemy.
And when you say you and me, I'm going to point out that one of the first ways that a lot of these LaRouche folks got attention before they outed themselves as LaRouche folks was by saying that that advocating for the return of indigenous land under the land back hashtag was all a conspiracy funded by Jeff Bezos.
Oh,
so they were putting themselves out there as basically saying, no. This whole idea of returning indigenous land is bad, and we can't have anything to do with it.
Well, you're just giving me more and more reasons to not support these people.
One of the groups sponsoring, not organizing, but sponsoring is the CPI, the Center for Policy Innovation. Their former, possibly present, I don't know, it's confusing to follow. Their former, possibly present boss is a guy named Caleb Mopan, who disintegrated in a horrible scandal and reappeared working for Russia TV, Russia Today. And the Center for Policy Innovation, which seemed to have gone defunct, is suddenly back.
Oh.
So who knows what's going on there? But they are one of the close LaRoucheite groups here in the U.S., and they only exposed themselves as LaRoucheites a year or two after they started their garbage. So they start by saying, don't return land to indigenous people. That's bad for American workers. And then they say climate change is a hoax. You see the progression.
Right. Well, and that's there have been countless papers about the tactics used by these organizations to brainwash people that they bring in through other means. So I think that, it's something that people should be more aware of, but it's also something that should be easily counteracted if people understand the methodology and understand what these people are really about. You would hope.
And here's the thing, though. There are people who, they won't even stop and question any idea of a peace rally. And when someone like Chris Hedges or Jill Stein says, oh, no, we have to do this, and here's why, they take them seriously. And this is the problem. This is the problem of having heroes. This is the problem of seeing people as leaders, whether they lead or not. Chris Hedges and Jill Stein believe they have the moral currency with us to say that we should do this and support them doing this because it's necessary. When Jill Stein didn't even have majority support on the Green Party National Committee. The vote was 55 in favor of endorsing the rally, 50 against. That's only a 5-vote margin right there.
Right.
Then you have 11 members who abstained and didn't vote at all. So you have 55 yes, 50 no, and 11 abstentions, where if just 6 had voted no, this doesn't happen. But for whatever reason, they felt they shouldn't vote.
Well, that goes back to the idea of weaponizing rules. We don't know what kind of pressure they were under. We don't know what they would felt that those 11 people said, I'm not going to vote. Because you would think that if they were in favor of it, they would have probably jumped on board. I mean, it sounds like these people were the ones that had qualms, but also didn't want to,
You abstain when you don't. You abstain when you don't want to be responsible for something not passing, but you don't want to support it.
Right. So, I mean, to me, I could fault those people to a certain extent, but at the same time, I don't know what's going on within that organization. So I have to assume that there was a lot of pressure. Yeah.
What reason do you have to not be willing to vote no on endorsing a Nazi rally?
Oh no, I'm not denying. I'm not saying they have any real excuse. I'm saying that it's just that pressure, and like people will bow to that without question. It's like they don't see the reason to put themselves out there whenever it's something. And that's the problem, is that people don't. And you'll notice that Chris Hedges, Jill Stein, we're talking about very, very, especially for where they are, they're well off white people who have influence and who have a following. So
they are far more comfortable and influential than I am. I will say that.
And they're far less at risk of actual violence from these people than the people that they're talking down to about unity and building coalitions with them. They're not at risk. Somebody if you're especially if you're visible. I know I look like this. I'm biracial. I'm part of the Navajo tribe, but I don't. You're not necessarily going to peg me when I'm walking down the street. I get it. But there are a lot of people who they're talking down to who just existing and being seen by these people is enough to cause trouble, or whose last name, especially with these anti-Semitic people, is enough to cause a violent reaction from some of these members. And so I think that that's something to always keep in mind. You can't tell me to go rally with people who are going to harm people that I care about or that I'm fighting for on a daily basis. That's not going to happen, because the risk to everything that I've been working towards being destroyed by them is too high. For what? A rally that makes Nick Brana richer? I don't get it. It's not going to stop the war. I promise you, after this rally, there will still be a war.
And if you want to go to a rally, there's a real anti-war rally in D.C. in March being put on by the anti-war movement again.
And the weather in D.C. is much nicer in March than February.
It's true. It
is. I mean, that's the better rally the way around.
I mean, imagine, if you think about where the monuments are, is there a worse place to be on President's Day than D.C.?
No, it's really not. And so I hope that we could, a real pro-war rally, a real you get me. You know what I'm saying. But people who are really legitimately anti-war and not bigoted putting on a rally is going to do more to motivate people to come out against the war who are diverse. Right now, the people who are coming out to this anti-war rally are really they're just not legitimately anti-war, most of them. And I mean, maybe some of the people who are coming out to the rally are, but the overall theme of the rally is not one that says that we want to end human suffering at the hands of state.
I'm going to be frank. I'm going to be frank, and then I'm going to wrap us up.
Okay.
I do not believe that the majority of people who are attending a rally hosted by the groups hosting this rally and sponsored by the groups sponsoring this rally are going to be an anti-war crowd. And I don't see that as being a safe crowd for our friends and comrades.
Yep.
On that note, these are the people who are cool with these trans bans. These are the people who are cool with these abortion bans. These are the people who are telling you that those issues must be set aside for class unity with people who are willing to let trans people and women die. That's what I want to leave you with tonight. And I hope everyone has a good night. And I'm sorry for ending on a heavy note and then saying have a good night. But I think everyone deserves a good night after watching tonight, and I hope you have one. And we'll tweet at you.